One of the things around regeneration has been, the sink estates and the architecture and the stuff that has previously gone very badly wrong. So, what are the key things that we can do to avoid making those mistakes of the past and creating, as we've heard, healthy and sustainable development? So, let's start with from the TfL perspective. I mean, you've got things like we now have new mayor. Sean Berry's very keen to do things like seeing solar panels on the. She said things like she's identified the TfL estate and saying, well, if you can put solar panels on all of the TfL buildings, you could power half of London, that sort of thing. So that's one idea. Obviously, you've got the hydrogen buses and stuff like that. So what are the other things that you guys think you could be doing to sort of add to those healthy and sustainable communities?
I'll
go.
Hello? Yeah, no, that works. Well, I'll talk about one thing, because there's a really interesting, innovative thing that we're trying to do. Many of our developments are above stations. You'll all know from travelling here, it's very hot in the underground, and that can therefore, how do you get rid of that, and how can we use that? So part of the engineering team at TfL is trying to design effectively I suppose the term would be a ground source heat pump to take heat out of the network, turn it into energy for the development above. And I'm not an engineer, so I can't talk about any more than that. But what a great idea! What a great idea! I mean, it'll cool the tube, power the building above, all very sustainable, green, etc. Lovely.
Is it about lateral thinking? I don't know. I mean, some of the idea of you were putting out the ideas of mapping health. Where do you find how do you create those communities? And particularly, I mean, one of the problems or challenges we're facing is I'm not going to go back to Brexit, but it's the older community of people now who are, looking particularly challenges around, housing and stuff like that. How can we sort of make developments that are, improve their outcomes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think this is working. Is this? Sorry. Okay, so I think in terms of avoiding mistakes of the past, and then I'll come on to this issue about the kind of ageing population and things. Part of it, I think, is if you look at the things where there have been mistakes that have been made, it's often something that is trying to do something very radical and almost throw away things which have been developed over a long time. And sometimes from an architect's perspective, it doesn't sound very exciting there's a model that works and you're building on that model and developing it and adapting it slightly. That, to a lot of architects, doesn't sound like a particularly inspiring thing to do. However, there's a lot of positive things in the way that the more successful cities in the UK tend to be the organic cities, which grew slowly at a human scale over a long time. And they've got successful characteristics which have made them the way they were. There's a lot of things which happened probably post-1950s, which were things about planning around travel by car, growth at a particular scale, single-use zoning, all of these things which have made a lot of have led to some of the mistakes which have happened. And I think if existing cities that were successful had been looked at in a slightly more analytic or more careful way, some of those things could have been avoided. So linking this into the loneliness thing, I think there's partly, it's not just to be able to look at the physical things and to see how those are working. The important bit is to say, okay, we might know how they're working, but it's what does it actually mean for people? And it's this is the bit that I probably skipped over quite quickly earlier, was that actually you need to combine data from a whole set of different silos. And local authorities have got a lot of data about where there are older population, where there are adult social services being delivered. That needs to be coordinated within that understanding of hard infrastructure systems, so that you can see where are the places which are harder to get to. Are there vulnerable groups of population living in these areas, and what can we do about that? So I think data and modelling and working across silos, I think, is key to this, and not trying to reinvent things and not doing something in a reactionary way, but studying it, looking at it carefully, and developing a response to that.
Currently, the thing with local authorities is that we've got, we go and identify some sites. So we've got 6 sites, and we reckon we can probably get 300 units on those sites, and then it's what we reckon we can get through the planning committee without the NIMBYs kicking off. That's seems to me is the sort of the standard approach of where we are now. That seems to be the mistake of the last however long. from a developer's point of view, what's your perspective? Are there improvements to the things we can do?
Yeah, it's bitty. So if you look at, it's very frustrating when you look at a site and think, well, you could put a great building on here, make a great place, but actually the piece of land is not the right size, not the right shape, and it's difficult or impossible to treat with the landholders left and right, front and back, to actually form enough of a, get enough of a sort of centre of gravity that you actually could put a proper place there, and that's very, very frustrating. So as a developer, we're not nasty, by the way. So we've got a soul. It's very frustrating because we're opportunistic naturally. So you'll react to the opportunity and do the best you can in that possible environment, but it's suboptimal what the outcome. I think that there is an answer. It's CPO, and unfortunately, politically, that doesn't go down very well. Boris, who's been very proactive for 5 years. Let's hope he's not so proactive for the next 5 years. It's just a comment. He only CPO'd, one piece of land in 5 years. And incredible. It's going to be a great outcome in Southall, I'm sure, for Berkeley. But you just think that maybe there's a chance of building proper pieces of land. So I think if you look at, and it's unfair, but pick an example. Canary Wharf, I think, is not going to look great when it's finished. And I'm talking now not about Canary Wharf, but the area south of Canary Wharf that you're not allowed to call Canary Wharf anymore. But I mean, that's not going to look great because the parcels are small and it's not being master planned properly. 9 Elms, on the other hand, probably, is probably not as economically viable. It's probably got some issues, but has been master planned far better. So there's an example of great impact. Stratford was master planned very well. I think Old Oak Common will be master planned very well because you've got a single guiding hand.
That's quite interesting. So I was going to bring Birmingham into the picture, and the master plan from Stratford was also created by the guy that had a really good hand in all of this was Clive Dutton, who obviously really made a huge impact in Birmingham. So and that involved really re-looking at a community in an area and rethinking. And so is it a master plan thing? Is that part of is that how you avoid making the mistakes of the past, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk on behalf of the council. I'm conscious of that, but they're as the landowner, they're keen to be seen to be doing the right thing, and so they're keen to listen to the market to see what is viable. As I say, they're keen that it isn't a commuter site with expensive high-end housing that means you can get into London easily because of the new infrastructure. They're keen that it serves as a truly regenerative force in Birmingham to deliver the quality outcomes that they're looking to achieve. New Street is a fantastic example of infrastructure regeneration with the station, and so they're looking to use that as a catalyst to help serve the city.
Andy, what's your thoughts in it? If you can change one thing?
The big thing for me is consistency. I mean, I'm interested earlier on when we were again discussing the new example. They were talking about a site that had a very high PTAL rating, should in theory be able to give a consistent view on such as an approach to car usage. I'm working on a site at the moment, very similarly has a high PTAL rating. The the scheme that's been designed for that site is a low car usage scheme. Very late in the process, local ward councillors turned around and said, no, I want a 1-to-1 car ratio because I'm in an area where I'm going to be in trouble politically if not. And in essence, that got traction and ultimately very heavily influenced the scheme. And how can a private developer be asked to work in an environment where such uncertainty can fundamentally change viability overnight? Camden similarly took a view, will self-develop a number of sites, worked up their early sites, got the first one through to ultimately going to delivery. Very late in the process, there was suddenly a decision, no off-plan sales, because we don't want this to go to institutional investors from overseas. Fundamentally, the viability of the scheme changed overnight because you can't defray your risk around funding. So it's consistency, having the courage of your convictions, the discussions we had about data and evidence earlier, following that data and evidence and really driving it through. Ultimately, if you don't do that, things fall over very quickly.
Go ahead.
And yeah, to come in on this, and there's something which I think is a really difficult thing, which is cities take a long time to make.
Yeah.
Development takes a long time, and it's those political terms are relatively short within the scale of those things. Hopefully, if you can get consistent and visible and transparent data, it means that there is a more accountable way of doing, or a more visible way of doing things, and that you shouldn't be able to get such a big swing in. You have a different leader comes in and everything changes overnight. I don't know. That's probably a overly optimistic view of what the power of the data could be, but it seems that there's a fundamental problem in the length of time it makes to make a city properly and development properly compared to short-term decision-making, and especially emotive decision-making, which might not be rational or evidence-based.
The other thing I'm very interested in is place shaping, and part of that is a narrative. So if you've got the data of this is what this community needs, this is what we think it's got to look like, then it's about telling the story to the people that are going to live there and make it the community that it should be. So there's a communications thing and there's a storytelling thing. Is that a part of what we haven't done? Milton Keynes was just Milton Keynes, as it were. There isn't a clear narrative now about what that, where it was one of the new cities or whatever, and it was supposed to be. But there wasn't this is what this place is going to be about. Is that something that we could? Is that useful, or let's chuck it in?
Yes.
It's something that I found. Particularly with the thing around Stratford, was that it became the place where people wanted to live, work, and stay, and that was the core. It was a core narrative. You look at the projects that have gone wrong, you kind of see there was probably some good architecture, there was probably a clear need, but what was that place about?
I think that was a compellingly clear strategy that was put forward by Sir Robin and his team that really, really worked. I mean, they'd identified the single fact that everybody who successfully knew him leaves, and then made that his core message, 6-7 years ago, and has followed through on that. So that's the consistency that you're talking about, and that's the sort of, I think we touched on it earlier on, that was a 20-year project that was smashed into 5 because of the deadlines of the Olympics, but it was followed through really, really well. There are things that we could have done better. So I think, the international line needs a deck over it. It's a lost opportunity which is being reacted to at Old Oak Common, which is great. And obviously, I think TfL have probably taken that on board as well in terms of
having a little look.
It's a free hit. I mean, they did it. I don't know if you know Melbourne have done a very similar thing. I think it's Federation Square. They put there and they built homes and offices above it. It's just free land if you can put a deck across that much railway real estate.
Yeah, we've gone from buying land because they don't make it to free land that you can.
Well, it is,
awesome. Yeah. Cool. I'm going to throw it up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions, any thoughts, any ideas, any comments that of particularly out of the sessions or anything else that's come up there? Aha.
This is a really cheeky question.
Go on.
Do you think Camden will introduce tax breaks to attract outside investors now?
Thank you for that. I can't speak for the council.
There's a thing to it.
Yeah, exactly. Things have certainly changed in Camden since that initial decision was taken. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay. Any more? Any final thoughts from our panel? I think then in that case, it really does just leave to show our appreciation to our guest speakers for this afternoon.